Again, thank you guys for joining us today for the Oracle Primavera Special Interest Group online learning series. And at this time, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Charles.
Okay, great. Thanks, Christina. And this topic, 4D scheduling, the reality and the hype, is a session really that's probably been about 6 years in the works for me. And we'll get to that as we get into it. Let me just tell you a little bit about me. A lot of project controls experience, kind of grew into using Primavera. Did a lot of either smaller projects or projects managed out of Excel/Microsoft Project. So when I discovered Primavera, saw the breadth and the control capability, I was hooked. I had the fortune right out of school to work with some guys, that last point there, being passionate about communication, who really emphasize that almost above everything else, that you've got to be able to listen if you're going to communicate well, understand, document, think through, and then come back with solutions and ability to implement. I want to start out by talking about what do I mean by hype. And in the first introduction I had to 4D, I went to San Francisco, Oakland Airport, just outside, and was invited to a presentation to Turner Construction about a new tool from Britain that had just been launched in the States called Synchro. And Synchro did 4D, and Turner had used it successfully to win some work at Sacramento Airport. So now we were at the Oakland Airport, and the team was considering using that, and specifically using it as part of a lean schedule review process. But the guy who had recommended we stop by and attend the session really said basically, hey, this is all hype. Everybody's talking about them, everybody's talking about 4D. There's not a lot there. It's overblown. It's too tough to do. We really make our bread and butter using Primavera platform P6. So hopefully at the end of this session, you'll have a sense of whether or not 6 years later now in 2014, 4D scheduling, linking a schedule to 3D dimensional drawings is still in that category of hype. Hopefully keep you guys alert and keep me alert. We'll do this in a setting of talking about a tale of two projects, the big and the small. It was interesting coming out of that Oakland session, landed back in Las Vegas. I was partnered with a guy there in Las Vegas at the time, and we were essentially doing scheduling services, some project management, some consulting. We weren't really selling software, but we were invited, left Oakland, actually drove back to Sacramento, flew into Vegas on a Friday. Our first meeting Monday morning was at the Echelon project in Las Vegas. Now the Echelon was going to be 17 buildings, the most buildings that Tishman's Construction had ever managed on one site at one time. Just down the road, so as you go to Vegas a lot, is the MGM City Center. The MGM City Center is the largest privately funded project in the history of the world. It came in somewhere around $10 billion, give or take, after claims are settled. We'll see where it winds up. This project, the Echelon, majority owner Boyd Gaming, was set to be the second largest privately funded project in the history of the world. They had, from what we were told, over 90% of their funding in place, something north of $4 billion. This is looking out from the Encore, so if you've been to Vegas, it can help you, orient yourself where we are. We're looking at the Strip out from the Encore. At this time, steel was over 10 stories in the air. We went in and met with the lead scheduler, a lady by the name of Catherine, and Catherine said, we really are struggling here. We've never managed this much laydown area for this many buildings at a single time. So we're not sure how we're going to do it. And so, well, interestingly enough, we saw some software last week that might be just what you're looking for. It's a tool called Synchro. So we scheduled a webinar. The guys connected for Britain, we ran it over, GoToMeeting. And then they flew in, did another kind of a mid-morning mini session with a couple more of the schedulers. And one thing that in 2008, the Tishman had there on site were 3D designers. And they were eager to get the tool. what they had done to try to anticipate the problems is they had one scheduler who took site laydown drawings, marked them up using a Photoshop or similar package, put them into PDF, and essentially it created a PDF week by week for what the site was going to look like over the next 3 years. And of course, the only certain thing was that the site wouldn't look like that week by week. And the challenge of keeping up with what would the site look like, how would they get material to the site. And they we're great at building a single building at a time anywhere in the world. You know, we succeed over and over, but this many buildings, this much coordination. In particular, to the left at the southeast corner, there's a tunnel that was going to come in and pop up about in the center of this picture that we're looking at here. And they were really concerned about access through that tunnel that was going to do their laydown space. Well, long story, very, very short now. We did about 2 days of training with Synchro. We were about a week into a 3-month plan to pilot Synchro and then sell it to the Echelon management team. Catherine took the laptop that had 2 days worth of preliminary, P6 connecting to Synchro data, showed it to her manager. So Wednesday afternoon. Thursday we had a purchase order. Friday morning at 10 a.m., Boyd Gaming put the Echelon project on hold. And it's still on hold. Steve Lynn has asked that they cover some of the steel with canvas and murals. As I've kept in touch with the team out there, there's still not plans to put the project back on the table as of yet. That left me with this kind of nagging question in the back of my mind. Would this 4D tool really have delivered for this project? Would it have solved the problems we were looking at for laydown, for access, for coordination, for safety, all the questions that had come up? That was 2008. Fast forward to a project where I am now. It's a public utility generation station in Huntersville, North Carolina, and a project to replace CM headers. Now, CM headers are water pipes that cool the generator. This same work was done in 2012, and it was my first time working in the generation site, first time in an outage, and I watched as this scope of work that the owner was responsible for, the vendor responsible for other replacement parts of the project, took 4.5 weeks. In spring of 2013, on this unit, with no other work going on, we looked at what we thought was an aggressive schedule. So maybe we can do this in 12 days, but the outage management said, no, we don't want to put it in this outage. We'll delay it until the fall of 2014 outage. And the question came up, could we do this in 72 hours? And what was driving that was access to space. You see there in that last point, the challenge was this. 11 crews needed access to 15 by 22 by 40 feet of space. And in that space, you also had equipment and scaffolding. And so in fairness, a lot of that 4.5 week duration was waiting for space and time to go to work. There are problems, of course, in execution. So we went at this pilot project with 4D scheduling tool trying to answer that question. Can we do this in 72 hours? And here I want to stop and ask another question that's become really important to me. What does the schedule mean? My background initially was in construction projects for distribution, then in some mega project construction, and now a power generation facility. And at all the stops along the road, it's been very common to be in a room with people looking at a schedule and have the realization we have trouble understanding what the schedule means, or being in the field and have trouble understanding what does this schedule mean. And as a scheduler now, trying to build this, put it together, vet it, at the tail end, run earned value on it, knowing that earned value isn't worth anything, not a good schedule out the gate. I've come to realize that it's very important that I communicate and understand what the guys in the field think the schedule should say, what the guys in the field think the schedule should mean. And then that becomes part of the challenge because those guys aren't necessarily going to be the strongest with the software or with some of our traditional schedule outputs. So I went into this pilot project that we kicked off conceptually, like our first demo with the project team at Synchro was about a year out from the outage, so August 2013. We went into it having taken some key concepts from the time in Vegas, so not everything stays in Vegas. Had a little bit of knowledge, and it stayed in touch with the Synchro team. Kind of in the back of my mind, looking for a project where it makes sense to use the software. So the biggest one was model for the problem you're trying to solve. You don't go in and model everything, every nut and bolt. You're not making a movie. You've got a model for the problem you're trying to solve, which then of course means that you've defined what you're trying to solve. You build a schedule activity for every visible step in the model. And this creates a different approach to scheduling. You ask some questions that you otherwise wouldn't ask as you build the schedule. Your goal, of course, is always to increase schedule certainty and decrease risk. But you're increasing certainty in some different ways. The certainty that you can fit everything in the space at the same time. The certainty that everyone in the room agrees that this is the correct sequence of work. Decreasing the risk. You're identifying, because you're asking different questions, you're identifying problems that before you would not have discovered in the field. And that was perhaps one of the biggest light bulb type experiences right out of the gate. The guys were on the table saying, hey, normally we would talk about this as we're in the field with the work order in hand, getting ready to do the work. Now here we are 12 months out, solving it, recognizing we have a problem, changing the work order sequence so we can execute the work in the field correctly. This fourth one was a big one. It didn't end up being as big an impediment as I thought it would be, but schedule design is another workflow. We know how to build schedules. We know the process. We know how to vet. We know how to do lean reviews. We know how to do vertical, horizontal reviews. We know how to do risk analysis on schedules. But 3D design or acquisition is not. And there we partnered, and that helped us. And then I'd seen this a little. This was why I was eager to find another reason to use a tool like Synchro for 4D and connect it to your P6 schedule. 4D provides exponential benefits. There's not a one-for-one. There's a multiplier effect. The time you invest, the resources you invest, the training you invest, and what you get out. So as building the 4D, here's a brief little timeline. We did about 6 weeks of our normal scheduled development, which is a kickoff meeting, and then we get back, a year out. We're meeting maybe once a week or every other week and refining. So we kind of did a, initial, here's what we've got to have, how many welders, how many riggers, how much, equipment. In that time, we identified an area of the schedule we really didn't have any knowledge because it was an owner group that travels to all the sites called Generator Services. We had to go do some research with them. But that's generally, it was 6 weeks to do the schedule development. Did a point cloud field walk down, meet and greet with the vendor that we selected to partner with. We did a point cloud field scan, took 3 hours, 11 scans on a tripod with Faro scanner, full color point cloud was a product of that. Then our vendor did point cloud modeling. Took about 2 days to produce a point cloud that'll be the the basis for the model that I'll show you in a bit. And then I sent the P6 schedule and the Autodesk model from the point cloud to Synchro partner at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. The following day, we had a kickoff for the pilot, about 20 of the key team members. And as I sent this, I've been marking up pictures, had about a 45-minute meeting with the Synchro subject matter expert who's going to do this initial one for us as part of the pilot. Anyway, 24 hours later, he was ready with the initial pass based on pictures marked up, reviewing the model file, marking up some screenshots as we're on the phone. And then we did about 4 days of round-trip refinements. Total on the phone with the Synchro software engineer, maybe had 5 hours total on the phone. At the end of this process, we were done. So once we had the 3D and the schedule, we were done in about a week. Now, once that was done, we came back and we would add additional model elements. We would continue to do schedule revision, and that was very easy. You'd modify the Synchro schedule. You can either use the API, or in our case, we're using the XER file to bring a new updated schedule into the tool. And then we created some highlighting of certain areas in Synchro. So that was the process to build this, to get this out of the gate.